Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to the main event, the history of the Champions League. I'm Martin in the chair as always. David is sunning himself over the next 2 weeks in Florida, so it is just Adam and I to take you through a rather chaotic knockout part of the 2011-12 Champions League. Adam, I hope we're able to take the strain and we might actually get this in under 40 minutes for a change. How are we doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah, there'll be less waffling and deep diving on random things from 1982, as David likes to do. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, I think there's only one place to start, and that's Naples. Napoli drawn against a very under fire Chelsea. Well, the manager under fire anyway, under Villas-Boas. The end was feeling as if it was nigh. Still in place as Chelsea went to the San Paulo, as it was then. And certainly not favourites. Napoli had impressed in the group stage. And they found themselves in front, the wonderful, the beautiful, the just almost perfect human being that is Juan Mata, finding himself with a free shot at goal. It's pretty calamitous defending, to be honest. One of those things, the ball just kind of bobbles up. He does well, I think, to just stay calm and keep the ball under control and put Chelsea into a very unexpected lead.
Definitely. Like you said, the context of it, they're really struggling at this point. It's a matter of when. I think for Villas-Boas at this point, it would be just after this game, if I'm not mistaken. Certainly before the return leg that he gets the bullet. And yeah, I think this is one of these games. Napoli are a really good team at this stage. Certainly going forward, they've got that front three that was always a big fan of. I just really liked the whole mix of Hamsik, Ezekiel Lavezzi, and Cavani. Cavani was, I guess, would we call him a bit of a throwback at this point? We probably would. It's been a few years since we had the proper all-action number 9, but I guess what he had as well was that work rate and ability to run the channels, etc. So they had a really solid base, which I think would have troubled any team, but particularly Chelsea at this point. They were very much in this stage where they're just biding their time, I guess, as they had a little bit before and probably a few years afterwards, biding their time until yet another manager is sacked and they can get a bit of a jump up. So yeah, probably wasn't a surprise for me. I think that Napoli won this leg. Maybe it's more of a surprise what comes next for Chelsea. In fact, it is a big surprise.
Yeah, it really is. Napoli do end up winning 3-1. Lavezzi with a very nice goal. Cavani, would we say bundles it in, Adam? I'm still not entirely sure.
Probably sums him up,
what
yeah.
he uses. What part of his body uses to just get it right over the line. And then Lavezzi again, and Chelsea defence is a shambles. David Luiz, it will surprise no one to be at the heart of that, checks out a position and Lavezzi does well to sweep it home. It could have been more. It's quite a chaotic game. And Chelsea could have scored again, but 3-1 is how it ended. Now, the way these are stretched out, Adam, 21st of February, that first leg, 14th of March, so you get 3 weeks in between, really. And in that time, as you say, I think it was a defeat to West Brom, and he's out. And Roberto Di Matteo, who was on his staff, former Chelsea player, of course, comes to the fore and answers the call. And like many others have in the past, basically seen Chelsea through from the winter to the end of the season. It might turn out a wee bit differently for him, right enough. And the return leg then, Adam, is we've kind of seen these nights before, but it was a throwback to that old Chelsea. Drogba showing that absolute power and dominance in the box to put them 1-up on the night. Brilliant inside cross from Ramirez, who I think was maybe an underrated part of that Chelsea team, in my opinion. Trademark, the next two Chelsea goals are absolute trademarks. Terry header from a Lampard corner, Lampard penalty, but in between Inler, I think it just responded very quickly to the Terry goal. The Terry goal putting Chelsea in control, by the way, because of the way goals. 3-1, 3-1. It goes into extra time, and it's big Ivanović who incredibly in the penalty spot, really, just for a cutback to absolutely rattle it into the roof of the net. Just typical right back action, I suppose. With his big arse and everything. But again, totally chaotic. Cavani misses a decent chance. I think 0-0, maybe 1-0.
Yep.
He hits the side netting. And maybe it's a lesson that if you have a big first leg lead and you're going to the visitors for the second leg, if you have Edison Cavani on your team, maybe be wary of a huge turnaround, as we would see in future years.
Yeah, I think so. And like you said, we've seen these nights at Stamford Bridge before. For all Chelsea's faults, around about this time, of which there are many, they are still pretty decent at home overall.
Yeah,
kind of that Mourinho, the famous record. I think they hadn't lost a home game in however many years it was across multiple clubs. We mentioned the other week, I'm sure. Yeah, it probably doesn't end up a surprise, but I think the context that we mentioned does. A couple of interesting things I think from this for me tactically, I guess, was firstly with Napoli, we're starting to see the back three appear again in Serie A. It has a bit of a renaissance in the Premier League, maybe a few years after that. After this, when Conte comes back to Chelsea, we see it a little bit more, but it comes back in Serie A here, especially when Napoli, when they've got the two men up front and the three centre halves. That's quite new, or old new, I guess, at this point. It hasn't been something that we've seen for a bit, so that was quite interesting. But I think the main interest here is the switch, obviously, from Villas-Boas to Di Matteo. Weirdly, even though I know he played in Chelsea, but he's very much a foreigner, but he sort of got them back to what I would class as a bit more of a modern British style of play. I guess it's just that ability to know what that club needs at that point, and he pretty much just did what any caretaker manager you would think would do, is just come in and let's go back to basics, let's not rock the boat, let's get the big players in that we want, let's not mess about too much with detailed tactical systems, let's just head back to kind of 4-2-3-1 standard. We'll have two holding midfielders and Lampard pushing forwards. Like you said, Ramirez I was a big fan of. He was very un-Brazilian at this time. It doesn't seem that way now. We've had 10 plus years of Brazilians being much more physical than they were when I was growing up, certainly. Much more harder working in there. But at this point, I remember thinking he's a bit strange that he's Brazilian. He's not that technical. He's physical. He's rangy. He felt more of a kind of modern European central midfielder. So yeah, he was probably underrated for that reason. But yeah, I think they just went back to basics. As I've said, Napoli are a decent team. Stamford Bridge, the buzz that they get from Di Matteo coming back, just being a bit more simplistic about it. Their approach not necessarily being as gung-ho as they were under Villas-Boas with that high line that we spoke about before. I do think if Villas-Boas had been there, Chelsea probably wouldn't have went through, just because of the whole the way things were going. But I think even that high line, Napoli coming with a 3-1 lead and just picking them off on the break would have been trouble. But the way that they sort of did it was a bit more conservative, yeah, which I think is probably a theme for them going all the way through. That's maybe why I'm not as a massive fan of this. Obviously, it's great for they won it, and it's a brilliant achievement. Caretaker manager, all that. It's not exactly free flowing, amazing football all the way through. But they did what needed to be done, which I think was the key thing for Di Matteo coming in. That obviously it would exceed their wildest dreams, but it was very much just a stopgap. Come in, get everybody back inside, galvanise it a little bit, and get us through the summer. And he more than did that.
I mentioned the Cavani thing as a bit of a joke, obviously involved in that remarkable Barcelona PSG thing a few years later. But I've just scrolled through some of the last few years, going back to obviously that final Istanbul. If there's a lead in a first leg of any substance, 2 goals or more, it's over. In any of these knockout phases, I might have missed one, but I've just been, from 06, 07 all the way to this 11-12 season, and to get a first leg lead of more than 2 goals would be weird in itself because it's just a lot more cagey. This seems to herald, Adam, what's going to happen. It seems just about every year now, all the way through this decade. Maybe it's going to calm down, but maybe not so much in the 20s, but certainly through here, we're going to get used to knockout football in the Champions League being absolutely insane. The Barcelona PSG maybe being the pinnacle of that. Barcelona Liverpool would be up there as well. Spurs Ajax, of course. That it really isn't over after that. And this seems to almost kind of set a trend because it's not there before it, really.
No, it's not. You're right. And it's weird because in my head, I've sort of got this 5 years or so coming up as a bit of a non-event. I think maybe it's a bit of a non-event tactically. Is probably where I'm coming from as always, because really from Barca 2011 up until Guardiola and Klopp coming to the fore, maybe not even their first seasons, but sort of 2016, 2017-ish, say. In my head, I'm thinking not really much happens in terms of innovations or interesting formations, all that sort of stuff. But I guess what does come, like you mentioned, is that drama. I don't know if it's maybe like we said, there's a couple of things there. We're starting to see the physicality, I think, particularly in the Premier League, become a huge thing. We've had from the early 2000s, I guess, onwards, we've had the sort of evolutions in the move to the 3-man midfields. We've had Benitez and Mourinho coming in and being concerned about what you do off the ball rather than on the ball. And then we're starting to see the rise of not quite pressing, but sort of more intelligence and speed towards the end of the decade. But now we're starting to see that physicality that the Premier League, above all others now, is known for. You can't really survive there if you are a nice, tidy player that doesn't have pace or power at all. And I think we're starting to see that here. So I'm not sure if it's maybe just that sort of change in the guard throws up a couple of interesting battles. You mentioned things like Barcelona PSG. There's a couple of games like that are a bit mismatchy. And maybe it just gives way to that when there isn't really set identities across national teams. We've had before, Italian teams might not really be able to travel, or Spanish players don't necessarily come to the Premier League and do well. That was a big one, wasn't it? They didn't necessarily travel too much. We're sort of starting to see the globalization and the physicality being the main factor. So I don't know if there's anything in that in terms of how things are changing, but whatever the reasons are, there are certainly goals galore in knockout stages from here onwards, for sure.
Yeah, it's a few seasons until a moment that I've talked about quite a lot with the Chelsea Atletico Madrid semi-final and people being kind of furious that it was 0-0 and boring, as if it was ever going to be anything less. And it's really up to those managers. And it's really all about those fans who would have been tense as all hell all the way through it. But maybe just football changing that way to be more attractive. I don't know, an emphasis on attack, being comfortable with chaos, which is definitely what we're seeing here. And almost to join that, Adam, is Milan Arsenal, which would have been even more incredible, obviously. Milan won 4-0 in the San Siro. 2 goals in each half. Kevin Prince Boateng. I mean, he'd been at Spurs, hadn't he? Been at Pompey, so maybe a bit of a. Is reject too hard? But you know what I mean. Just he'd had his chance in the famous Premier League and hadn't really taken it. And what a goal he scores to kind of kick things off there. Robinho again, formerly the Premier League, with 2 more, and of course Zlatan has to get in on the act. 4-0, you cannot possibly turn that round. Well, Arsenal were 3-0 up at half time. At the Emirates, and couldn't quite get it done because it's Arsenal. But yet again, so close to again the kind of chaotic momentum swings that, as I said, you're going to be used to soon.
Definitely, yeah, and I think this definitely sums it up. But the Boateng thing as well, I would say reject, yeah, but I think we're just starting to see the complete disparity now. If not in terms of big teams, but certainly in terms of like what are Milan doing signing someone like Kevin Prince Boateng, who has been a sort of cast off from not the best Premier League teams of this era, shall we say? But I think it's maybe just that can't afford these players that we did have before. Our only sort of hopes now are bringing in some ball players on their way down, such as a Robinho type figure, or adding this physicality that might help us out. But I think that was a huge surprise that Milan won 4-0 against Arsenal for me, because I can't explain. I think we've done a half decent job of it, but it's worth reaffirming how miles away Italian teams are at this stage now. Considering how dominant Milan were in the last decade, in terms of appearances in finals, etc., it turns around so quickly for them, and they're not able to get things going. So, yeah, I think that obviously that display for Arsenal was, I think Wenger said himself, was the worst ever in Europe, that first leg game. And to be fair, they do a decent job of getting around, like you said, probably getting to half time. You are actually ending up disappointed that you've not been able to go and do it, because, like I said, it's not a great Milan team at all. You just look through it and think there's guys in there that you barely even remember. But it's just a whole lot of nothing, really. Obviously, you've got Ivanović there, fair enough. You've got Thiago Silva, who was terrific. Everything else is not getting into the Arsenal team, I think you'd say. So it was a huge surprise that they won 4-0, and probably not a surprise that Arsenal were able to come back, but just fall short, which I guess is a recurring theme for Arsenal.
Yeah, it is. We'll talk about Gary Neville maybe next week. It's incredible how time really rounds the voice and you add a bit more gravel to it, because it's still quite high strung. It pierces through. He's not long started in this commentary role. And of course, he has his famous goalgasm, which we will get to next week. But he has a precursor to that, because second half at the Emirates, Arsenal, as I said, 3-0 up. There's a chance for Van Persie, who I think does what he should do, which is try and dink the ball over the top instead of blast. I just don't think he has the space to do that, and we get a kind of Neville that we were obviously going to hear later on, and doesn't quite know yet that he speaks when asked the question or given the nod, either by his main commentator or a producer. He's just kind of cutting through with these weird and ridiculous sounds. But there is a television presence that will be shaped as we go on. We have to talk about APOEL then. Adam, Lyon do the job, do it fairly professionally, 1-0 at home, and they go to Cyprus, and possibly the shock of the Champions League season, even given the 2 games that we've talked about, with one nearly result.
Yeah, I think so. Penalties are a big factor obviously in this one, and they're going to be a factor later on as well, both semis and finals. But yeah, I think that's a pretty big shock. Definitely, Lyon are still in their maybe not right in their era, but they've still got all the names that you would certainly expect. APOEL, one of these teams we spoke about, just appearing well organised, 4-4-2. Everyone knows their roles, and yeah, we can't really complain. Lyon obviously be disappointed. It's an understatement, I think, to get through, but it wasn't exactly just APOEL on their own, I guess is what I want to say, because you've still got Basel kicking about as well in this knockout stage too, albeit not for very long, and CSKA Moscow as well. So there's teams starting to appear again now that are more organised, like we said, the physicality, they're able to sort of get a head start, or maybe more of their technical counterparts, shall we say. Every team now is tactically aware. There's very few teams getting ripped apart. That's not the case, as we'll go on to with Basel, but there's very few times that teams get ripped apart completely. I think you'll say there's organisation, and team and managers are now aware that we need to be organised, or teams are going to rip us apart on the break or whatever, particularly how chaotic these games can be. So yeah, I think APOEL just do a really good job of just containing Lyon's firepower and getting them to penalties, and as we know, cliche of the century, but it does become a lottery. And I think Lacazette missing the penultimate penalty, I guess, is the big shock there. If that goes in, and we'll see, it's a case of who blinks first. But I think that probably just sums Lyon up nicely. They're one guy that you'd be expecting to come up with the goods, just doesn't quite manage it.
No, he'd obviously scored in the first leg, hasn't he? He'd find his way to Arsenal, of course. Okay, well, you mentioned Basel, or Bal, depending on what kind of pronunciation you want. They finally find a way through Bayern at home, a late goal to put them ahead, and any notions of a kind of disciplined, organised, physical performance, the likes of which you kind of mentioned, I mean, blown out the water fairly quickly. Adam, 3-0. Bayern were ahead at half time, and they added 4 more for Basel's cheek in the second half. And again, a team with destiny in mind, because of course the final is at the Allianz.
Yeah, I think there's always that feeling, isn't there, particularly when it's a big team. There's always that feeling they're going to go the extra mile to try and get through. A big shock, definitely, for Basel to get the win in the first leg. Mario Gomez is the key for them at this point. They've got this really. This is the period of Bayern, probably the only period of Bayern that I've actually quite enjoyed, because they were able to sort of marry that a style of football that I thought was quite interesting. Obviously, it'll come on to Guardiola, and they'll enhance that as well after this season. But they've got lots of good young players, Martin, at this point, which I'm always a fan of. We know obviously about the World Cup in 2010 and that sort of new age of German football. We've both read Das Reboot, and we understand how that all came about. But it's just, there's just a few of them appearing. You've got Toni Kroos, you've got Philipp Lahm, you've got Manuel Neuer, even Holger Badstubber was never pulling up trees, but he was solid. And then you've got the crown jewel of Thomas Müller, who so good that he invented his own position in a couple of years. So out of all the Bayern teams that we've spoken about, I think I probably enjoyed watching this one the most, and I've not even mentioned arguably two of my favourite wingers, certainly one of my favourite wingers ever, in Arjen Robben and Ribery. So they just had a nice
peak,
balance.
Right? Yes, it's exactly that. It's blending this homegrown youth, a bit more experienced figurehead, spearhead, and Mario Gomez. Two flying machines that now have the confidence and experience and strength and nous that Ribery and Robin have. This isn't Chelsea's Robin. This is they're both fully formed world-class threats on either flank.
Yeah, just a nice balance is probably the right way to describe it. You've got centre halves that can centre half. You've got very flexible fullbacks, and Philip Lahm and David Alaba. A nice base with standard double pivot, if you want to call it that. Luis Gustavo as the sort of holder, and Toni Kroos as the playmaker. Muller at this point probably just playing off Mario Gomes, I would say. And then those two. I think Robin gets 2 goals, doesn't he, in this game? And
yes, he does.
Obviously, Mario Gomes gets 4, incredibly. Just a nice balance. I think, like I said, they were exciting around about this time. I quite enjoyed watching them. It wasn't the sort of Bayern that you might have had 10 years ago or so before that, where it was just a collection of players that were better than everybody else, and they just sort of got their way through with that sort of German efficiency. They were a bit more exciting at this point, I would say.
And they weren't FC Hollywood, which is obviously
I think that always helps.
They were labelled at the end of the 90s, isn't it? And very much wrapped up in that German national project that you talked about, heading towards the World Cup, but also they were weirdly disappointing in that Euros. Obviously, the end of this season. No idea how much of an impact this final might have on a few. I don't know, but Balotelli absolutely destroyed them in that semi-final. From memory. But they got the big one, as they tend to do. Well, a German side who did not get it right were Bayer Leverkusen. Similar hiding, Adam, really, against the European champions Barcelona. 3-1 in Germany made sure that was done and dusted anyway. Fair to say Barcelona did not rest on their laurels in Catalonia. Messi with 5. Christian Tello, who I'd forgotten all about, I'll be honest, popping up with a couple. Quite what Karim Bellarabi was doing, even looking for goals at the end, but he did get one with
some finish though. Some finish. Give him his players. What a finish that is!
Fucking hell! It maybe is one of those you just got fuck it, have this.
Yeah, definitely.
7-1. And again, Adam, they are just purring, right? They don't seem to be taking, days off and just playing in second gear. It just seems to be absolutely all out. Maybe they should have.
Yep, I think if they're not getting if they're not suffering from fatigue at this point, the manager certainly is. I think he's said himself in various books the 4 years that Barcelona was the pressure of it all was akin to about 10 years anywhere else. I think you can see that now, given he's at the time of recording, been at Man City for 9 years, and he doesn't look anywhere near as stressed as he was then. I think it's obviously a different thing, isn't it, when it's your club and the emotions of it, and you've done so well. But I think they are good. Obviously, at this point, you've now got Fabregas in there as well, giving them a little. If they needed a little bit more ball playing ability in the middle, they've just went to the nth degree on it. Bernd Leno in goal for Bayer Leverkusen has an all-timer. We've not spoken very much about how bad any bad goalkeeping for a number of seasons, but particularly in that second half, I think if Bellarabi was just hitting it, I think Bernd Leno was halfway down La Rambla looking for tapas for some of those goals, because as much as you could say Messi got 5 goals, I think Leno probably assisted 3 of them, which wasn't ideal. But I think they are motoring. It's probably, we've spoken before, haven't we, about getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but about how teams like this and their kryptonite. Obviously, we've seen a pertinent example with Inter Milan. a few years before, the worst team I think Barcelona could probably come up against in the semi-finals would have been a defensive Chelsea looking to suffocate games and hit on the break. And I just don't think they were at that stage of the season. I just don't think they were good enough to get themselves through it. But yeah, getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Fantastic performances in both legs, and rightfully through with 9 goals to spare, was it? 8 goals to spare.
It goes 10-2 in aggregate, 7-1 for Bayern, 5-2 for Real Madrid. Not quite as brilliant. They will get their avalanche in the quarterfinals, I suppose. This is against CSKA Moscow. They were ahead. Ronaldo obviously away. CSKA get an equaliser injury time. It at least made it kind of interesting for a while. And yeah, Real Madrid took them a wee bit to get through the gears. 2-0 up by 55 minutes, and then foot down to win 4-1, 5-2 in aggregate, as I said. We'll maybe come to Real in a moment, Adam, the quarterfinal. The last 16 games are a lot more intriguing, a lot more finely balanced. Zenit against Benfica. Two sides, certainly Benfica, I think we enjoyed in the groups. And 2-2 with a couple of minutes to go. And I love games where you get those absolute call and answer, call and response thing, because Benfica equalised through Cardozo with 3 minutes to go, make it 2-2, and then Shirikov immediately, he'd scored the first of the game, first of Zenit's goal, sorry. Just responded a minute later. So Zenit hold a 3-2 lead, and it's just one of those brilliant kind of return legs. Benfica do get that goal just before half time. They're ahead on away goals, but everything's pretty much in the balance until 93 minutes when they see the job out. That is a kind of proper two-legged tie. Two fairly even teams. I mean, I know they are clearly by the score, but just in general how they shape up in 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, no, I think they're quite similar teams as well as being even. It's that piece that I mentioned at the start of the show. Probably functional teams with good amounts of physicality and energy and work rate, but with a couple of quality players up front, mostly for Benfica, I would say, and maybe midfield for Zenit. So yeah, it was a nicely balanced game. Obviously, it goes to the last kick, doesn't it? Pretty much in the second leg with Nelson Oliveira scoring for Benfica to send them through. So I think that Cardoso goal in Zenit St. Petersburg, I actually remember watching that and thinking, okay, that's them. They've got the 2 each, and they're going to be good to go. But then Shirikov scores like a minute later, and you're thinking, okay, that leaves a little bit of interest in the return leg. But ultimately, it never really, because Zenit didn't especially turn up. And you look at the 2 goals for Benfica and the times. I think I bang on about this all the time, but a goal in first half stoppage time and a goal in second half stoppage time just kills them. It's just a professional performance from Benfica to get them through.
And maybe a bit of switching off just before the end of either half.
Yeah.
From Zenit and Marseille Inter. Again, a kind of intriguing game. Goals just seemingly coming at the end of games. Andre Ayew had scored for Marseille in 93rd minute to give them that 1-0 lead. And finally, Diego Milito had equalised in the tie, put Inter ahead on the night. But then 2 injury time goals. The last one obviously didn't matter in the end, but Brandao had level for Marseille. Adam, giving them the control. Inter needed to score 2 goals. They only got 1, I think, 96th minute. That wasn't going to happen. And we've spoken at length about Inter and their kind of chaos.
Marseille, yeah. This was the season that they. Remember, we were saying there was this little crossover between Lyon being pretty dominant and then PSG entering the 4. I think Marseille had finished second. They'd won it. Did they win it? They won it
9-10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they finished second the year before, which would be the year that they came in here. Just a very Didier Deschamps team, I guess. I know he's got an embarrassment of riches at national team level, but there is still again that word functional aspect to his teams. It maybe speaks to how he was as a player. I think just quite well organised.
Have
They
teams
have a good
ever,
team.
Adam, ever looked like their manager more than Didier Deschamps teams?
No, I don't think so. That was just sort of rattling through my head as I was saying the words there. I don't think so. He does just, even again with the embarrassment of riches that France have, he's still to the last couple of years they're a bit boring, aren't they? Considering you think their national team, their depth of talent that they've got in the national pool. It's always that cliche, isn't it? France's second team could probably get to the semi-finals of major international tournaments, never mind their first team, and yet there is still that functional, boring aspect of them. They have a good mix here, I think, though. They've got Gignac, who was just a big beanpole target man. Around about this time, they've got a bit of star quality. Look, Remy, who I enjoyed when he went to Chelsea a little bit later. The Ayew brothers, which I think both of them end up appearing in England, don't they?
Yeah.
Andre probably has a bit more success, or is certainly there a little bit longer, but Jordan was there too. Cesar Azpilicueta, who was here for a bit before going to Chelsea, where he'd obviously be there a bit longer. So yeah, just again, maybe similar for me to the two we just spoke about, Benfica and Zenit, just quite functional, not quite the French style of team that we'd maybe seen with Lyon, or even before that in the 90s, where we had a new team to think about every year or so. Just functional and getting themselves through, like you said. Once Brandao gets that equaliser in the San Siro, it's kind of game over. Despite Inter getting that win, Gianpaolo Pazzini that scores for Inter, he was the next big thing, as there always is in Italy. He was the guy when he came through at he was. I remember him at Fiorentina, but I think he was somewhere before that. I can't remember where it was, but he was supposed to be the next big thing, and it never quite kicked off for him. He got that, as most of them do. You get that move to Inter, and it's not really working out. And what will I do next? I'll just go and sign for AC Milan for a bit, and then you sort of just disappear after that because you've milked it dry. So yeah, not the best from Inter there. You'd still be expecting them to go through, but ultimately just those two late goals, one on each leg for Marseille, are the clinchers.
Just on Deschamps, Adam, he's really he's learning his trade. He's kind of grinding it out. Monaco first, he won the cup, and then obviously took them to that final. That Porto won.
Yeah.
Just Juve for a year when they were in Serie B. Obviously, a Juve legend. Why did it end so abruptly there?
I think he was just a moment in time. To be honest, I think it was obviously Capello left after Calciopoli, and it's I guess that's a well-worn tale, isn't it? That you want to bring in someone who knows the club, blah blah blah, someone I guess who's willing to do it as well as the first thing. Despite being at Monaco, he sort of transitioned right away from Monaco. Valencia, wasn't it? He went to Valencia for a year after Chelsea, and then right into the Monaco gig for 4 years, and then got sacked, I'm sure. So he was probably just a right time to go to Juve. He probably wouldn't have got the Juve job if they hadn't got relegated, and they were obviously looking for a figurehead, someone who knew the club, blah blah blah, that was available and wanted to manage them in Serie B. He, I think, fell out with, this will not surprise you for Italy, but he sort of fell out with the club, and I can't even think who it would have been at that point that was in the executive teams. I don't know if it was Agnelli at this point, or if that was a couple of years later or not. But yeah, he fell out with them there, and despite winning the league, he was gone, and he pitched up at, it was a few years later. He pitched up at Marseille. It wasn't It wasn't in the
Got a
midget
couple,
thing.
yeah. Then he wins the league. I think he won three cups in a row. It's this summer he goes to the French job after Euro 2012. And I just find his kind of career that'll be 14 years next summer.
A long
Obviously, with the
time.
it's a long time in
A long
international
time to be, especially. I mean, now it's more common for younger, for managers to be going to international football younger. But at the time that he did that, it was a bit strange. But like you said, I think he obviously got the two gigs, Monaco and Marseille. Did very, very well. At Marseille certainly. Like you said, first, second, couple of cups. And then it probably was a bit of a surprise to go to France. I'm not sure he would have expected himself to be there.
And even just that gradual thing as well, though, Adam, that they lost to Germany in that World Cup quarter-final, I think. The heartbreak of losing at home Euros to a very average Portugal team. And to come back and win the World Cup in some style. Almost certainly should have won more. But it's still, he's still there. I can't imagine there'll be much more after this World Cup. But anyway, somewhere David is laughing at us being over 40 minutes, despite him not being here and just shouting, it's you, it's you, it's you. We'll maybe tidy up, because for all that drama and intrigue of the last 16 and the semi-finals next week and the final, my goodness, there's chaos everywhere. If I was to put these quarterfinals into some kind of Football Manager simulator, I'm not entirely sure I would get much different on the way out. APOEL's dream comes to an absolute shattering halt. This is when Real Madrid fill their boots like the others. 8-2 in aggregate, 3-0 in Cyprus, 5-2 at home. Ronaldo only getting a couple of those 8. They're ticking over as one would expect. Adam, maybe a kind of conversation when you talked about the results from Bayern and Barcelona in the previous round here, that some clubs are just they need to play one another because they're just far too good for more and more of the Champions League sides. Marseille meeting their match with Bayern 2-0, 2-0. Just seems very professionally done, and they must now be just completely believing it's going to be theirs because they're at home.
Oh, definitely. I think as well that they're on form big time. If each gets those 2 goals in the second round, the second leg, and I think he would not necessarily be a starter. I think he started this game. I'm pretty sure Mario Gomez was injured, but again, it sort
Such
of when a team,
dangerous player.
He was, and but it was one of those players as well that just wouldn't mind, not quite a super sub, but wouldn't get himself annoyed about it or anything like that. He was just a proper team player who'd pop up with some really, really important goals here. So I think that I was thinking at this point that they would particularly go and do it because everybody just felt like it was firing. You know what it's like when you might have an injury and then the player that comes in scores a couple of goals, and then subs come on and score a couple of goals, and it just feels like everybody's sort of singing from the same hymn sheet. That was the vibe that I got, certainly with the one before was obviously huge, the amount of goals that they got, but it was against Basel. But this one was a step up in quality, I would say, and they dealt with them as efficiently as you'd like, with not being behind for any of the game, and just a 2-0 and a 2-0.
Yeah, I can't remember if I've made this point before. Apologies if I have, but the idea of having obviously the home final can galvanise, can motivate, can inspire. But at the time of recording, the season that's just passed as we record, Adam, it can get too much. We think of Bilbao, who you and I were at the quarter-final of that Europa League game, obviously, and they were lifted. But their performance against Manchester United in the semi-final was just too much. They were out of control. They lost the head, one setback, and the whole place just kind of fell apart. Sometimes you can want it too much. And I think I had a cursory glance at the time, only 4 times a club has won that one-leg European final at their home ground, and only once in the last 40 years when Feyenoord won the UEFA Cup.
Oh, wow.
Destiny's a thing in the mind as you go through, but I think it just becomes too much pressure.
Yeah.
We can't fuck this up. And, well, it isn't the advantage. It just clearly isn't the advantage that a lot seem to think.
No, that's a fair point. I didn't realise it was the trivia side of it. I didn't realise it was as bad as that, because you do kind of think it, don't you, that their names on it, all that jazz. But yeah, I can see that the pressure of it all just gets on top of you. The sense of occasion gets you. That's an interesting one, yeah.
I sometimes think Chelsea at this time are more Portuguese than any Portuguese side, not in terms of literally the makeup, although clearly they have a lot of Portuguese players, but just that tournament toughness. I just didn't fancy Benfica at all, and Solomon Kalou got that Chelsea away goal. Frank Lampard made it too. Javi Garcia made it interesting, I guess, Adam, in the last 5 minutes, but another Portuguese player, Morelos, managed to settle any remaining nerves and injury time, and Chelsea went through. Milan-Barca, I remember going up to Aberdeen to watch this with a mutual friend of ours, not for this, I was up for Aberdeen for work, and we did a wee night out watching the San Siro game. A wee bit disappointed and surprised, really, that it was 0-0. It was just getting to the stage where I'm not sure you were allowed 0-0s anymore. But Barcelona made very sure. In the end, a couple of penalties, and Nocerino, I think, had equalised for Milan, but got the job done and cruising on.
Yeah, and I think at this point, that like you said, none of these results are a surprise. Maybe that little bit of doubt can creep in, because Barcelona were always defensively vulnerable. I think we know that.
Just no one can get near them.
Yeah, I think that's it, and I think the whole fatigue aspect of it. There's obviously around about this time there is rumblings that Guardiola is absolutely done. Not I don't remember so much in terms of any fallouts or anything like that, but I think just the intensity of it. I think the whole Mourinho thing, close to 2 years now of it, I think was constant as well, and it's just starting to suffocate. They were, so like I said, they were still great going forwards and great at keeping the ball, but like we said, with physicality and counter-attacking becoming more to the fore, that is a bit kryptonite for them, and they had 1v1 defenders that you wouldn't really fancy 1v1 against some of these players, particularly guys like Ivanović and Drogba, for example. So they were vulnerable in those transitions. We'll see it in the next round that we'll talk to for sure. So yeah, maybe not a surprise in this one, but I guess maybe it's hindsight on the way here. But the fact that they weren't as free-flowing as they were even the year before by a long stretch, probably you could say it was potentially in the post what happens next, but not really a huge doubt against Milan, even though they do get that goal back. But I think the 2 penalties for Messi sum it up, and then Iniesta, who they were, but it was bordering on reliance of Iniesta and Xavi, I think, at this point, just to sort of keep controlling things. He gets the third, and I think there's no way Milan are scoring 2 more goals.
We're obviously back projecting just because of the nature of when we're talking, but I don't know how many people were warning of this. They just looked so imperious, and yes, of course, just the nature of the play, they will look a wee bit vulnerable. You can't have players everywhere at all times, but getting the ball off them's a problem. And there weren't many predicting what would happen next, and we will pick that up next week. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Semi-finals and the final, Gary Neville and all of that next time. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.